Okay, so I'm continuing to talk about leading a group skills training. And I was talking about leadership and co-leadership. I had one more point to make from that slide, which is co-leaders need to work on their relationship with each other and with the help of team. It's worth working on this. This relationship becomes a model for the whole group to use skills to maintain balance, to balance acceptance and change. You just sort of permeate the group with the nature of the relationship of the co-leadership. Okay, next slide says leadership roles, the different roles. And like I said, sometimes you might not be able to have two different people playing these different roles, but these are the roles. The primary leader of the group is the task master. That's the person who starts the meeting, keeps time in the meeting, moves on from person to person, conducts the review of homework in the group, which is how the group starts. The person who presents new skills to the group and gives a homework assignment to the group. So really the person who's doing the teaching of the group and the management of the group. Then there's the other set of tasks. The co-leader attends to the group tone and the patience in the group. Notes and addresses tensions in the group, conflicts, demoralization. And how do you do this? You do this with minimal intervention when possible. Sometimes you do this partly during the break, where the co-leader can hang out with group members. Sometimes during the group, making brief comments, making eye contact. It's just sort of a subtle thing when it's done well. Validates patients. Just routinely make sure the patients are feeling validated, because the taskmaster might need to be pushing the teaching of skills and might not always balance that. So you balance it by validating and reinforcing patients for effort and for staying on task in the group. Extends the teaching of certain skills, as I've already mentioned in the previous video. Supports the clients when they're pushed by the leader. I've basically said that. And supports the primary leader if the primary leader is under pressure. And that's even done by saying things to the primary leader like, my God, you really show fortitude. You're pushing forward. I think the group's having not an easy day today, but I really admire you for staying on task. Something like that, okay? Next slide is entitled Set Up the Group. So now you've got your leadership determined. You know what your targets are, which is your agenda. At least it's how you conduct your agenda. And now, how do you set up the group? Well, there's several things. The overarching point to make is that this is a class, not a psychotherapy group. And yet you do psychotherapy within teaching the class. It's a psychotherapeutic way of running a class, but really you run it more like a class, so it should have the trappings of a class. Every client should have a notebook with handouts and assignments. You should have extra pens and paper available so that people don't have to, so that you're just always ready to support them being good students. Have loaner notebooks available if somebody didn't bring one to class, just to loan during that class. You sit around a table as opposed to an empty space in the middle of a bunch of chairs. You use a whiteboard or a blackboard or a flip chart, something that's really like a classroom, and that you're putting up visuals to support the teaching. And you use behavior that would be more like if you're a teacher of a classroom, rather than this open-ended psychotherapy group process idea. Yeah, it's a real problem if you start acting like a group process psychotherapist. Let's say some patient comes in and says, hey, I'm upset with so-and-so, another patient, for sitting in my chair. That's the chair I always sit in, and I'm really mad at you. Now, you have a choice point as a leader where to go with that. You could process it, say, how do you feel about that? What about that? Does that make sense? How are you guys going to solve this? And make it a whole thing. And you might, in some psychotherapies, do that. You might, in some psychotherapies, try to understand what's going on between the two people. You might try to turn a skills group into a somewhat of a therapeutic moment, of asking each person to use skills and continue their dialogue about who's sitting where. But generally in a DBT group, you would do none of those. In a DBT skills training group, you would say, I can understand that's kind of distressing. I'm hoping you're going to use your distress tolerance skills for now. And maybe you guys will find a way to work this out outside of group. I'd be glad to consult with you if you need to. But right now we're staying on task with the teaching. So you don't have to do it just that way, but I'm modeling that sort of idea is you're staying on track. You're not getting into processing. If you start to process that, then other people notice that. Then other people expect you to process interpersonal things going on for them in the group, which then it replaces all the time and the style with which you want to teach skills. Next slide is attend to the tone of the group. This is where it's tricky, because with each individual, you want to have a tone that includes a lot of validation, a lot of compassion, a lot of support with each individual, but at the same time you want to have expectations that they put out effort and that they try to change, they try to use the skills, they try to practice the skills, they try to do homework. And you want to treat each of them as with great dignity and with a sense of this is special to have you in the group, and it should be special for you to be in the group. So there's a kind of an attention to each individual, which is a leadership thing to do. And this could be very difficult because how you would validate one person might be different than how you'd validate another person. So if you're somehow making a comment to one patient in the group about how they just did, you might need to anticipate that other people are going to have a reaction to that. And if you know the group well enough, you might even say something there like, "Hey, George, I know this might not make sense to you, so hang in there while I talk to another name. What's another name? Belinda." You need to be aware of different group, because each thing you say is a group intervention, even if it's an individual intervention. Also, in attending to the tone, in each group, in the group as a whole, try to be mindful in the moment, present, fully present, awake, alert, all there, as if that's the whole thing in the world. At the same time, try to be warm and gentle, try to be inclusive of everybody and accepting, and yet rigorous. You're expecting people to work in this group. You want to demonstrate that by being prepared, by having done your homework before you teach, and really structuring the group and being clear, so you can both be relaxed but structured as you teach the group. And always emphasizing practicing, practicing, practicing. If there's one thing about group skills training that's different than a lot of other psychotherapies, it is everybody should be practicing everything and in the group. Okay? We'll talk more about how you do that. Next, now we're going to go through the group one step at a time. What do you do first when the group begins? Well, after a little chit-chat, you do a mindfulness practice, and you want it to last less than 5 minutes. So one of the leaders starts out, and after checking in and chatting with people, and after noting absences and making announcements if there's any that need to be made, hopefully you don't need much, then you start with a brief mindfulness practice. I have certain steps I use to lead a mindfulness practice in DBT skills groups. So here's the steps. First, I try to, I consider it trying to say something that elicits interest in this mindfulness practice, that has to do with a personal story. Maybe on my way to group today, X, Y, or Z happened, and I found myself in distress about something or having an emotion about something, and so I tried a certain skill, a certain way to use mindfulness, and I want us to do it all together now. Could be a story that you've read. It could be a story from television. It could be a story from another person. Any number of things. It could be a piece of research about mindfulness that you wanted to say something about. But somehow or other you want to get attention, get interest, get people leaning into what the mindfulness practice is going to be. and then say, okay, so here's what we're going to do, and get down fairly quickly to the specific and hopefully simple instructions that are as specific and clear as possible, making it brief. For instance, I wouldn't, with most groups, just say, let's observe the breath, as if everybody knows what it means to do that. No, I might say, you know, when you close your mouth and you breathe in heavily, you can sort of sense where on your nose or in your nose, the furthest out point that you can sense air passing through, okay? So everybody close your mouth and take a deep breath in. Okay, did you notice where that is? Now, we are going to take 3 minutes where we just notice ourselves breathing with our mouth closed, and we're going to have our attention rooted on that place in the nose when the air's going in and the air's going out. Okay, that would be a specific instruction. Next thing I do after getting attention or setting the stage and then giving an instruction is to inform people that you should anticipate that your mind is going to wander from the focus of attention. So it's going to come, it's going to go. Let people know that, because people start to think, oh, there's something wrong with what they're doing, and that's totally natural. That's part of a mindfulness practice, is that your attention goes away, and then part of the mindfulness practice is to notice it's gone and gently, non-judgmentally, bring it back to the focus of attention, whatever that is. So I anticipate that and give instructions for, when you notice yourself distracted. Next, I'll anticipate judgments and say, you may have judgments about this exercise, about your performance of the exercise, about what other people are doing, or just anything else that passes through, because judgments are always going through the mind. So I instruct to notice your judgments and see if you can just see them passing through your mind and then let them go. And bring your mind back to the exercise. Okay? Then I'll say, I'll then give instructions saying about how long it's going to be, like it's going to be 3 minutes, or it's going to be 2 minutes, or it's going to be something like that. And I'll sound the bell to start, and I'll sound the bell to stop. And so then that's it. Then we do the exercise. And after the exercise, I will ask people to give input about the practice, usually just in the form of starting a sentence by saying, I noticed X, or I observed Y while I did this practice, just so everybody can sort of hear, and you can do a little further teaching if it's appropriate based on what you hear. And then I like to suggest to people that they could link this practice to where they might use it in their daily lives. Okay? The next thing you do is begin to review the homework that was assigned at the end of the previous class. So first I start by restating last week's homework assignment. Now, last week we agreed that you were going to see if you came across a difficult moment or thing in your life this week and notice that it's difficult to accept, and then apply the steps of radical acceptance. Okay? Everybody remember that? And then I'll ask for a volunteer to start and give their version, what they did with the homework. Might have some people right away said they didn't do the homework. I'll get to that. And while somebody is presenting their homework, and I'll go around the circle, I like to start with somebody who did the homework as opposed to start with somebody who didn't do it, because I like to reinforce that model for everybody over and over again. Oh, look at this person did, and look at how I'm going to help this person, and how the more specific you do your homework, the more you can learn out of it and get out of it. So I will ask somebody to tell us for a few minutes about their homework. Before that, I ask them to give me their diary card as they're presenting their homework, and I glance down at the diary card while they do their homework. I specifically only am looking at the part of the diary card where they circled what skills they used each day of the week. So I can just see a quick view of a pattern of what skills are they using, what skills are they not using. I may or may not comment on it, but I get a running sense of that. Okay? I'm going to have to stop now, and we'll go on.